Yasan and Bano dared to love in a land where love was forbidden, but their secret marriage turned into a death sentence when family honor demanded their blood. Not far from his mud brick house was a large haveli surrounded by tall boundary walls. It belonged to the most powerful family in the village. There lived Bano, the daughter of a tribal leader who ruled over the villagers with strict traditions. Bano was 18, known for her beauty and kindness. She spent her days inside, weaving colorful embroidery patterns on shawls and bedsheets to prepare for her arranged marriage. Her hair was long and black like the night sky, and her smile carried a warmth that touched whoever saw her. They had first noticed each other at the village spring, where women came to fetch water and shepherds brought their animals to drink. Hassan would always lower his gaze respectfully, but Bano often stole secret glances at him. Her heart felt a strange pull towards this simple shepherd boy who moved with quiet dignity and never spoke unless necessary. Day by day, these silent moments turned into something deeper within their hearts. Sometimes, Hassan arrived early to fill water for his goats just to catch a glimpse of Bano carrying her clay pot on her head, her delicate feet moving gracefully on the dusty path. In the evenings, when the village streets fell silent and lanterns lit every home, Bano stood near her widow, looking at the distant hills, wondering if Ashan was watching the same moon. Ashan, lying under the open sky, wondered the same. Their love grew in shadows, hidden from the harsh eyes of the world around them. Neither wanted to disrespect their families, but neither could kill what their hearts felt. They knew their clans carried a history of blood feuds and hatred that stretched back generations. Any union between them was forbidden by strict tribal rules. Lovers like them had only one fate if discovered. But the power of love is such that it blinds reason and ignores fear. The more they tried to resist, the deeper they fell for each other, unaware that every moment of stolen love was pushing them closer to a dark and tragic end. As days passed, Hassan and Bano realized that their love could not remain hidden forever. Each sunrise brought them happiness to think about each other, but each sunset filled their hearts with fear. They knew their families would never agree to their marriage. Bano's father had already promised her hand to a rich tribal man in another village to strengthen his power and influence. The thought of living her life with a man she did not love made her heart feel heavy like a stone. On the other side, Hassan spent nights staring at the dark sky, wondering if there was any way he could protect their love from the cruel rules of their people. One late evening, while returning from grazing his goats, Hassan saw Bano standing near the old, dried tree at the edge of the village. Her face was covered with a thin scarf, but her eyes told him everything. She had tears in them, and fear was shining through. She handed him a small folded note and quickly walked away before anyone could see them. Hassan kept the note safe until he reached home. Under the light of an old lantern, with shaking hands he opened it. It read only one line: "If we do not leave, they will kill us both." That night, Hassan could not sleep. He kept thinking about what Bano wrote. Her words were true. Honor was valued above life in their tribe. The idea of running away scared him deeply, but he could not imagine a life without her. Before dawn he packed his small belongings, 2 sets of old clothes, a prayer mat, and a tiny pouch of savings he had collected over the years. As soon as the morning azan echoed through the quiet village, he left his house quietly and walked towards the tree where Bano had waited the previous evening. Bano was already there, dressed in a simple black shawl. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but she held her head high with determination. Without speaking, they started their journey together towards the main road. For hours they walked through silent fields and rough tracks, until they reached the small bus stand outside the village. The first bus to Quetta arrived just before sunrise. They sat at the back, away from curious eyes. Bano kept her head low, holding Hassan's hand tightly under her shawl. When they reached Quetta, the city felt overwhelming. There were busy roads, tall buildings, and people rushing everywhere. They found a small court where a lawyer helped them register their marriage. There were no family members or guests to witness their happiness, only a dusty office room and a silent clerk stamping papers. but to them it felt like the greatest celebration of life. That evening, they rented a small room in the old city. It was dark, with peeling walls and only one small window that opened to a noisy street. Yet when they sat together in that room as husband and wife, they felt like the richest people in the world. For the first time, they could breathe without fear of being judged for loving each other. But hidden deep in their hearts was an unspoken truth. They knew their families would never accept this marriage and would come looking for them. Still, in those quiet first moments as a married couple, they allowed themselves to dream of a life filled with love, peace, and freedom, unaware that their dreams were standing on a thin thread that could break at any moment. When Bano's father woke up the next morning and found his daughter missing, rage burned through his veins like fire. He searched her room, shouting her name again and again, but there was only silence. Her mother sat on the floor, crying with her head covered, knowing the punishment she would face for not protecting her daughter's honor. The news of Bano's disappearance spread across the village within an hour. Men gathered outside the Haveli, whispering about where she could have gone. Some suggested she had been kidnapped, while others, who knew of Ihsan's silent admiration, believed she had run away with him. Bano's father, filled with shame and anger, called all the elders of his tribe to his house. They sat in a circle on colorful rugs in the large veranda, drinking tea and discussing the disgrace she had brought upon them. To him, it was not just his daughter's betrayal, it was a direct insult to his pride and the honor of his bloodline. In his eyes, she had destroyed the dignity of the family by marrying a poor shepherd boy. The men sat silently, nodding to his words, each thinking of their own daughters and sisters, fearing such shame could visit their house too. After hours of discussion, they decided that Bano and Ihsan must be punished. The tribal leader, an old man with a long white beard, announced the decision. Their killing was not just revenge. It was to restore honor and teach others that love marriages outside the tribe's will were forbidden. Women in the house cried silently behind curtains, knowing what fate awaited Bano if she was found. But no one dared to speak against the elders' decision. That afternoon, Bano's father sent out groups of men in jeeps to search every nearby village and town. They carried guns and daggers, determined to find the couple and bring them back dead or alive. They first went to Ihsan's family house. His mother fainted upon seeing armed men outside. His sisters cried and begged them to spare their brother, but their pleas fell on deaf ears. The men searched every room, overturned storage trunks, and even looked in animal sheds, but found no sign of Ihsan. From there they visited the bus stands, threatening anyone who refused to give information. Fear spread among villagers and bus drivers, who quickly shared what they saw. One driver confirmed that a couple matching their description had boarded a bus to Quetta early that morning. Upon hearing this, Bano's father clenched his fists and ordered the men to prepare to leave for Quetta at dawn. That night, back in the village, people gathered in small groups discussing the dishonor brought upon the tribal leader. Some felt pity for Bano and Ihsan, thinking of them as innocent lovers, but most kept their sympathy hidden, afraid that supporting the couple would bring the tribe's anger upon them. As darkness covered the village, the sounds of crying mothers and sisters echoed through mud houses. The decision had been made. Ihsan and Bano's love had now turned into a matter of pride and revenge for powerful men. While the couple slept peacefully in their small rented room in Quetta, dreaming of a happy life, a deadly storm was gathering behind them, ready to destroy their dreams forever. Before the first light of dawn touched the barren hills, Bano's father and his men were already on their way to Quetta. Their jeeps moved fast over broken roads, leaving behind clouds of dust. Inside, the men sat silently with their guns resting on their laps, their eyes cold with determination. No one spoke during the journey. Each man knew their purpose. It was not just about bringing back a runaway daughter. It was about proving that no one could challenge the authority of their tribe. As the sun rose over Quetta, the city began to wake up. Shopkeepers opened their shutters, students walked towards their schools, and buses filled the roads with noise. Ihsan and Bano woke up in their small rented room to the sound of azan from a nearby mosque. For a few moments, they felt at peace. Hassan offered his prayers on his old prayer mat, while Bano prepared tea on a small gas stove. They sat together on the floor, sipping tea from steel cups, their eyes filled with silent dreams about the life they wanted to build. They spoke about finding work. Ihsan thought of working at a mechanic shop or a hotel, while Bano dreamed of sewing clothes for women in their area to earn money. Both believed that if they worked hard, they could build a life where no one would find them or force them apart again. But unknown to them, danger was already circling their new world. In the village, the men continued their search in Quetta with ruthless energy. They went straight to the bus stand from where the couple had arrived. Showing Bano's photo to vendors and tea stall owners, they threatened anyone who refused to speak. A young boy who leaned buses remembered seeing a girl with a black shawl and a boy with a thin beard getting off the bus 2 days ago. When questioned further, he pointed towards an old area of the city where many poor migrants lived in cheap rented rooms. Without wasting time, the armed men split into 2 groups and drove towards the area. They walked through narrow streets, knocking on doors, forcing landlords to reveal the names of their tenants. Fear spread among the poor families living there. Mothers pulled their children inside, shutting doors behind them as the men walked past with guns hanging from their shoulders. Meanwhile, Ihsan and Bano decided to step out to buy some groceries. They covered their faces and walked quickly through the narrow lanes, not knowing that their enemies were searching street by street. While returning, Bano noticed a black jeep parked near their building. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw 2 men standing outside, talking to their landlord. She quickly held Ihsan's hand and whispered that something felt wrong. Ihsan felt panic rising inside him. He guided her through a small side lane and told her to keep walking without looking back. They entered their room through the back entrance and packed their few belongings into an old plastic bag. Their hands were shaking and Bano's eyes filled with tears as she realized their worst fear was coming true. Just as they were about to leave, they heard loud knocks on their door, followed by angry voices shouting Ihsan's name. They froze in silence, holding their breath. The search had reached their doorstep, and there was no escape in sight. The loud knocks on the door continued, each bang shaking the weak wooden frame. Ihsan stood silently, his heart thumping so loudly that he felt it might burst. Bano's hands trembled as she clutched his arm, her eyes wide with fear. For a moment, neither of them moved. They knew that opening the door meant death, but staying inside meant being dragged out like criminals. The shouts grew louder, as the men outside threatened to break the door down if it wasn't opened immediately. Ihsan quickly looked around their small room for a way out. There was only one tiny window that opened into a narrow alleyway filled with garbage and broken bricks. Without thinking twice, he pulled it open and helped Bano climb out first. The rough edges of the window frame scratched her arms, but she did not feel the pain. She only felt fear. Ihsan quickly followed her, closing the window behind them as quietly as he could. They crouched low and moved quickly through the filthy alley. Stray dogs barked as they passed, but they didn't stop. Their feet slipped on rotting food and muddy water, but they kept running until they reached the main road. Ihsan hailed a rickshaw with shaking hands. As they got in, Bano kept looking back, afraid they would see armed men running after them any moment. Ihsan told the driver to take them far away, to a place called Saryab, an old area of Quetta where many people from different villages lived, and where it was easy to disappear among the crowd. When they reached Saryab, they got down and walked through busy streets, trying to calm their racing hearts. Ihsan found a small tea shop and asked the owner if there was any room available for rent nearby. The old man looked at them with kind eyes and said his brother had a room for rent behind the market. Ihsan thanked him and walked with Bano towards the address. Inside they found a dark, damp room with a broken fan and stained walls, but to them it felt like heaven because it meant safety, at least for that night. As darkness fell, they sat on the floor, silent and exhausted. Bano's face was pale, her eyes swollen from tears she hadn't even shed yet. Ihsan placed his hand on hers and told her not to lose hope, that they would find a way to escape the city soon. But deep inside, he felt hopeless. Their families were powerful, and the men searching for them would not stop until they found them. Every hour felt like a borrowed moment. They ate a piece of stale bread with water that night and lay down to sleep on the hard floor without any bedding. Outside, the streets remained alive with the noise of trucks, buses, and rickshaws. But inside their small room, there was only silence. Bano stared at the cracked ceiling, thinking of her mother, wondering if she was crying for her or cursing her. Ishan lay beside her, staring at the door, listening for footsteps, knowing that no matter how far they ran, their fate was slowly catching up to them, with each passing hour. In their hearts, hope was alive, but reality was closing in like a hunter waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The morning sun rose slowly over Quetta, filling the city with its golden light. But for Ihsan and Bano, the new day brought no peace. They woke up early, their backs aching from sleeping on the cold cement floor. Bano quietly washed her face using water from an old plastic bucket, while Ihsan sat near the door thinking deeply. Their savings were running out quickly. Ihsan knew they could not keep shifting from place to place without money or help. The thought of returning to their village was impossible. Death awaited them there. Escape to another city seemed like their only hope, but even that was becoming harder each day. Ihsan remembered his cousin Saeed, who worked in a transport company in Quetta. Saeed was the only person from his family who had treated him kindly in the past. Ihsan decided to call him, thinking perhaps he could arrange fake identity papers for Bano, so they could travel to Karachi by bus without anyone recognizing them. He borrowed a mobile phone from a tea stall owner and dialed Saeed's number with shaking fingers. When Saeed answered, Ihsan spoke quickly, telling him about their situation and begging for help. Saeed listened quietly, asking a few questions about where they were staying and what their plans were. Ihsan felt hope returning to his heart when Saeed told him not to worry, that he would arrange everything by evening. Ihsan thanked him again and again before hanging up the call. When he returned to the room, Bano saw the small smile on his tired face and asked what happened. Ihsan told her about Saeed's promise, and for the first time in days, Bano allowed herself to breathe calmly, thinking their nightmare might finally end soon. But Saeed was not the man Ihsan believed him to be. As soon as he ended the call, he sat in silence, thinking about the consequences. Helping Ihsan and Bano meant putting himself in danger. Bano's family was powerful, and their anger had no limits. Saeed knew that if he informed them about the couple's location, he would win their favor and avoid future troubles. Without wasting time, he called Bano's brother and told him everything Ihsan had shared, including the name of the area where they were hiding. That evening, Saeed called Ihsan again and asked him to meet near a petrol station on Saryab Road to collect the papers. Ihsan believed his cousin completely and agreed without any hesitation. As the sun set, Ihsan and Bano left their small room once again, thinking that soon they would travel to Karachi and start a new life far away from the shadows of their past. They walked together under the orange sky, their hands tightly locked, their hearts beating with hope and fear at the same time. But hidden in the darkness were cars full of armed men sent by Bano's family, waiting near the petrol station. They sat inside, silent and ready, with their guns loaded. Saeed stood near the fuel pumps, his face expressionless, watching the road as he waited for Ihsan and Bano to arrive. In that moment, their fate was sealed by betrayal, and the love they had risked their lives for was now hanging by a thin thread ready to snap. As darkness spread across Quetta and streetlights flickered to life, Ihsan and Bano walked silently towards the petrol station where Saeed had called them. The evening air was cool, carrying the smell of dust and diesel fuel. Bano's heart beat rapidly in her chest, and Ihsan tried to calm her by squeezing her hand gently. He told her everything would be fine soon, that Saeed would give them the papers and they would take the night bus to Karachi. In his mind, he imagined the city lights of Karachi and the sound of the sea, where no one knew them and no one cared about tribal honor. When they reached the petrol station, they saw Saeed standing near a pump, wearing a brown shalwar kameez and a black waistcoat. He waved at Isin with a smile. For a moment Isin felt relief, thinking finally their troubles were ending. Saeed walked forward to greet them. He hugged Isin and placed his hand on Bano's head, as if blessing them. He told them to wait for a few minutes, because the man bringing the fake papers was on his way. Isin and Bano sat on a concrete block near the station, their small plastic bag resting between them. Minutes later, 2 black jeeps turned onto the road and parked a short distance away. Yushan noticed them, but did not think much, believing they were normal travelers stopping to buy diesel. Suddenly the doors of the jeeps swung open, and men with guns stepped out quickly. They moved with silent coordination, surrounding the area within seconds. Before Yushan could stand up or react, 2 men grabbed him from behind, twisting his arms and forcing him to his knees. Bano screamed as another man pulled her up roughly, covering her mouth with his hand. People at the petrol station froze in fear. Shopkeepers quietly closed their shutters, and tea sellers backed away, not wanting to get involved. Saeed stood silently, his eyes avoiding Isen's desperate gaze. In that moment, Isen realized his cousin's betrayal. Pain filled his heart, but he had no strength to speak. Tears rolled down Bano's cheeks as she struggled to break free, but the man holding her only tightened his grip. The men tied their hands behind their backs with rough rope and blindfolded them using pieces of dirty cloth. They pushed them into the back seat of one jeep, while other men collected their small bag and checked it for any weapons or money. Saeed walked away towards his motorcycle without looking back, his shoulders tense and his heart heavy with guilt, but he knew it was too late to change anything now. As the jeeps started driving away, Ishan and Bino sat pressed against each other, unable to see or move, feeling the vibrations of the road beneath them. They could hear the sound of engines, the honking of cars, and the chatter of the city fading behind them. In their hearts, fear spread like poison. They knew they were being taken back to the place they had escaped from, the place where love was considered a crime punishable by death. That night, the roads leading out of Quetta carried them back towards their fate, while the silent sky watched their journey with indifference. The jeeps drove through the silent roads of Balochistan, under the dark sky filled with countless stars. The headlights cut through the dust rising from the rough tracks as they moved further away from Quetta towards the remote villages hidden among barren mountains. Inside the jeep, Isan and Bano sat tied and blindfolded. They could not see where they were being taken, but they could feel every bump on the rocky road, every sudden turn, and every cold gust of wind blowing through the broken jeep window. Neither spoke a word. Their mouths were dry from fear, their hearts pounding with the realization that the end was near. Bano silently prayed for a miracle, while Ashan felt only helplessness. He had always believed he could protect her, but in that moment he felt his strength draining away like water leaking from a cracked clay pot. After many long hours, the jeeps slowed down and finally stopped. The men roughly pulled Isan and Bano out, their feet stumbling on the uneven ground. They were dragged forward, their hands still tied tightly behind their backs. The cool night air carried the smell of dry sand and burnt wood. As their blindfolds were removed, their eyes adjusted to the dim light of lanterns flickering in the cold breeze. In front of them stood tribal elders wrapped in thick shawls, their faces stern and emotionless, while armed men circled them silently. They were in a deserted mountain area, far from any village, where the rocky hills stood like silent witnesses under the pale moonlight. The elders sat on rugs spread over the cold ground, with Bano's father in the center, his eyes filled with silent fury. He did not speak a word. His presence alone was enough to keep everyone quiet. Isan tried to look up at him but quickly lowered his gaze, knowing that no words could change what was about to happen. One of the elders cleared his throat and began to speak in a heavy voice, declaring that Isan and Bano had brought shame to their families and dishonored the tribe. He said their love marriage was a rebellion against traditions passed down through generations. His words echoed through the silent mountains, cutting through the cold night air like a sharp knife. As he spoke, Bano closed her eyes, tears rolling down her cheeks as she accepted her fate. The men holding them forced them to sit on the rocky ground. Their hands were untied, but only so they could fold them in front of their chests. Two men stood behind them holding rifles, their fingers resting on the triggers. Isan turned his face towards Bano. Under the dim lantern light, he saw her eyes looking back at him, filled with pain, love, and silent goodbye. He wanted to speak, to tell her that he loved her until his last breath, but his throat felt dry and his lips refused to move. Without any further announcement, the elder gave a small nod. In that cold silence, 2 gunshots rang out, echoing across the sleeping mountains. The sound scared away birds, resting in the nearby cliffs. Yushan and Bano's bodies fell forward onto the rocky ground, their blood mixing with the dust of their homeland. The men stood silently for a moment, then started walking back towards the jeeps. The elders left without looking back. Their verdict had been carried out to restore their honor. That night, the cold winds whispered through the dark mountains, carrying with them the final cries of 2 lovers who only wanted a simple life together, but were punished for dreaming beyond the chains of tradition. As dawn slowly spread its light across the mountains of Balochistan, the bodies of Ishan and Bano lay cold on the rocky ground where they had been executed. The dry wind blew dust over their lifeless faces, covering their fresh blood with a thin layer of sand. There was no one to mourn them there. The men who carried out the killing had left quietly under the cover of darkness, leaving the couple where they fell. The silence of the morning was broken only by the cries of crows circling above, drawn by the smell of death. When the sun rose fully, shepherds passing through the mountains saw the 2 bodies lying close together. Word spread quickly, traveling from the hills to the small markets, then to nearby villages, and finally to Quetta city. By noon, their killing had become the talk of the entire region. People spoke in hushed voices about how the lovers were punished for daring to choose each other over the rules of their tribe. Some spoke with anger, others with fear, but most remained silent, knowing it was dangerous to question the decisions of powerful tribal elders. In the village where Isan and Bano had grown up, there was no mourning. Isan's mother sat in her mud house with her head covered, staring blankly at the ground. Her neighbors came to sit with her, but no one spoke. They only heard her silent sobs, escaping her dry lips as she rocked back and forth on the dirt floor. His sisters cried in a corner, hugging each other tightly, their tears soaking their scarves. But no one dared to raise a voice against what had happened. They knew that even their tears had to remain silent under the heavy shadow of tribal honor. In Bano's house, her father sat with other elders drinking tea, their faces cold and expressionless. Her mother wept behind closed doors, beating her chest in grief, but her cries were ignored. For the men of the family, their honor had been restored. They believed they had removed the stain of shame from their bloodline. In their eyes, their daughter had died a necessary death for daring to love against their will. As news spread further, human rights activists in Quetta condemned the killing, calling it a brutal honor crime. They demanded justice, saying love was not a crime to be punished with death. Small protests were held in front of government offices, with people holding placards reading, "Stop honor killings," and "Love is not a crime." Journalists covered the story for local news channels, interviewing lawyers and activists who spoke strongly against the tribal system. But as the camera lights switched off and the crowd dispersed, the dusty streets remained the same, carrying the silent knowledge that justice was only a word, not a reality in their land. No arrests were made. The tribal elders returned to their daily lives with the same respect and power as before. The police did not dare to interfere in tribal matters, fearing for their own safety. The courts remained silent, and government officials pretended nothing had happened. The mountains continued to stand tall, hiding in their silent shadows the blood of those who dared to dream beyond the rules written by men who valued honor over life. After the brutal killing, Isan and Bano's bodies were left in the mountains until late afternoon. When the tribal men returned to collect them, their skin had turned pale under the harsh sun, and the smell of death was carried by the dry wind across the empty land. The bodies were placed in the back of 2 separate jeeps. Even in death, their families did not allow them to remain together. Yusan's body was taken to his family's small graveyard at the edge of the village. His mother cried loudly, beating her chest, while his sisters wept silently beside her. Old women of the village gathered around them, their eyes filled with pity, but none spoke against what had happened. Yusan was buried quietly before sunset. There was no funeral prayer held at the mosque, no words of farewell by any elder. His grave was marked with a simple stone, without his name carved on it. His father stood at a distance, his face hard and his eyes refusing to show pain. He believed his son had brought shame to their family and deserved what he got. As the grave was covered with dry soil, Yusan's mother fell to her knees, placing her hands on the freshly dug earth, whispering his name over and over as tears fell from her tired eyes onto the silent grave. Bano's body was taken back to her father's house. Her mother collapsed upon seeing her lifeless daughter carried in by the men. She held Bano's cold hand against her face, crying until her voice turned into silent sobs. But her father did not look at her even once. For him, Bano was already dead the day she chose love over his honor. The elders ordered that she be buried quickly and far away in the old graveyard near the river, where those who brought dishonor were laid to rest. Her grave was dug on the outskirts of the cemetery, close to the thorny bushes, away from the graves of respected family members. At sunset, as the sky turned orange and pink, Bano was lowered into her lonely grave. The dusty wind blew over her shroud, lifting its edges as if trying to uncover her one last time. No one placed flowers on her grave, and no one offered prayers for her soul. Her father turned away before the burial was complete, walking back to his house with slow, heavy steps. Her mother sat beside the grave long after everyone left, placing her palm on the mound of earth, whispering her daughter's childhood name with trembling lips. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Slowly, the village returned to its normal life. People stopped talking about Yusan and Bano. Their story became just another whisper in the winds that blew through the silent mountains. But at night, when the moon shone bright over the dusty fields, old women told their daughters the story of 2 lovers who were punished for dreaming of a life together. They spoke of how love could turn into death when it crossed the lines drawn by pride. The graves of Yusan and Bano remained silent under the same sky they once looked at with hope. No one dared to visit them, and no one left flowers to honor their love. But the cold desert winds carried their story across the land, whispering their names softly through the thorn bushes and rocky hills, reminding everyone that love may die at the hands of men, but its memory lives forever, hidden in the silent graveyards of forgotten lovers.